There's a gentleman where I live that came out of the military that used to jump out of helicopters, not afraid of heights. So he, very similar to what you said, I don't want to work for somebody and be told what to do all the time. I want to create my own business. So he said, I want to find a business that nobody wants to do because they don't like height. So you want to know what he does? Gutter cleaning. In central New York, there's a lot of trees. There's a lot of housing development with trees. And the gutters get cluttered with leaves and debris. Well, the reason it's important to take that out is because it rains a lot here and it snows here. This gentleman cleans my gutters 4 times a year because there's no way in heck I'm getting on the top of my roof, right? So he has become the gutter master.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Roundtable number 2. Once again, Mark and Ken, where Mark is former banker, Ken is current executive coach, where both of them are helping veterans, small business owners break into the contract spheres. I'm also working with the veterans and military spouses, and I'm helping them to get funded. What does it mean for you? Well, essentially, that means that we are small business owners. We are over there every day with you in trenches. We are not some fancy Wall Street folks or celebrities who are just saying that they do understand they do understand what they're talking about, but not so sure if they do understand your everyday struggles, because most probably they already forgotten about them. Just yesterday, no, yes, yesterday. Yesterday was Thursday. I talked to Marine. He's in transition. He's like a couple of weeks in transition to civilian life. And he is already starting to think about that he wants to kick off his company because he's done with being told what to do. He wants to own his own life destiny and help his family to feel much more stability than they used to have. Oh, and of course he's starting to think about what can be done. The first thing which came up was, I wanted to get contracts, government contracts, or work as the DEI supplier, but he had no idea how to do that. And essentially he haven't even choose the industry. And on one hand, I truly believe that this is smart, that he's trying to do some research before he will, jump all in and say something, I'm going to build the electrical company. Even though I do know a shit about electricity, well, I'm going to do my best. I will have my veteran certification, and that's going to open up all the doors for me, right? He's doing his research. He's trying to pick industry. He's trying to ask all the right questions. He's super flexible with everything except of the location. He's in North Texas and definitely not planning to move. So from your perspective, you're working, from my understanding, mostly with already like stabilized companies, or at least created. What would be your advices?
Ken, feel free to start first if you like, sir.
So I think my reaction is that his situation, we've heard that situation before where people coming out of the military tend to expect to be able to get into government contracts fairly easily because of their veteran status. And so we would probably want to caution him about that assumption. We know that it takes a lot to be able to participate in the government procurement opportunity space, and especially just starting out, that will be a tough road. So really being able to do his research on, one of the things I hear in your intro is really kind of get in touch with what he wants to do and what he wants to be and what he wants to earn and what he needs to earn. I mean, there's a lot of soul searching that needs to go on by anyone who wants to open a business, because it's a hard road to get a business up and running and have it be successful. So, part of the options that he has is to really work with, there's a lot of resources that are available to veterans these days to help them get started in a business. But, just really having an opportunity to do that real hard thinking about what he wants to do and how long he wants to do it and what's his passion about. Where is he passionate about doing something that he would love to do, regardless of the dollars. So for me, that was sort of my initial reaction.
To do something, especially when you're in transition, regardless of the dollars. God, I can tell you from my own experience when I was moving from Ukraine to United States, I promise you all I could think about was dollars, like how I'm going to provide
Yes,
to my family. So it's hard, sometimes even impossible to forget about thinking
I,
about
I,
how you're going
I
to provide, right?
yeah, no, I'm never assuming people can set that aside. I'm just saying, if he's picking a business, if he's trying to decide what kind of business he wants to go into, yes, we may all have to do things in the short run to, to be able to take care of our family and to meet our bills. But if you're thinking about building a business or, creating a business, really important to understand, build from what you love, because you're going to hopefully keep it a long time. So that's just my thought process.
All right, so start
Mark?
to build from what you love. Mark, what's going to be your take on that?
So it always scares me when somebody says, I don't want to work for anybody anymore and be told what to do.
Okay, that's
I'll go back.
very
I'll go
strong
back to. I'll
idea.
go back to rudimentary things. Well, he just defined his why. His why is, I don't want to be told what to do. So I'm going to start a business because I don't want to be told what to do. That's okay. That's why a lot of people start a business. The next important question that, and Ken alluded to this, is what skill sets do I have that when I get out of the military, what do I want to do? What is the need for my skill set? Where is the need for my skill set? What is my plan? How am I going to get there? How long will it take me to get there? Right. So everybody, Yaryna, knows their why. And Ken and I talk about this all the time. When you start a business and you know your why and you know what you want to do, you have to say, what do I want the end result to be? The end result is, I want to build a business so I can make an income for the next 30 years. And after 30 years, I want to build a business to develop a lifestyle. I want to build a business to sell. You have to build something with the end in mind. Think of it like building a house, okay? A business is your house. It's your income. It's responsible for everything that you have because it's your income, right? So
Yeah,
think about when
you're
you buy
right,
a
but
house. But
you do
here's
understand that this is like very hard jump from, oh, you know what, do what your heart will tell you to do, find something
yeah.
what's important for you, to the, you know what, man, let's be really realistic on that. You
So
need
have
to make money.
you ever heard the saying, your head and heart have to match? His heart might tell him, I want to do this, but then his head could screw it all up because he's got all these things swirling. They got all these things swirling through their head. And where I'm going with this is if your heart tells you want to start a business, you need to understand the why behind it and the how behind it. So think about this for a second. Here's the analogy I always use. When you go buy a house, don't you have an idea of what you want your house to look like? Right? You know what kind of house you want, right? But you have to have a plan. If you're going to build a house, you have to have a plan. You know what you want it to look like, but it's building blocks, right? You have to, when you build a house, you have to build it one block at a time. You got to build the foundation. And you have to have a plan, right? Think about building a house. You have an architect that draws the house because that's what it's going to look like. But then you have everything else. So, okay, how am I going to build the house? What blocks am I going to use? What's the systematic approach to building it?
Right,
Running a
so in
business
his
is
case.
Building a business is the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Ken.
Mark said it. We all have to find our purpose in what we do. What is it that draws us to this? I know in my case, I'll share my story a little bit there, is that when I came out of my corporate life, I looked around at what I was going to do next. But I had gotten a good inclination that for me, what was really fundamentally important was it didn't much matter what I did as long as I felt like I was using my talents and skills to make a difference and make it better, whatever that was. And I can plug that into a lot of solutions. But if I understand that I would be doing something that wouldn't be doing good, or that wouldn't be making a contribution in some way, or wouldn't be using my skills, I would not go there.
So I want to just expand upon something, because for me, it doesn't matter if you're coming out of the military or you're downsized from corporate America or you get out of college and you just want to start your own business. It's all irrelevant. It's all irrelevant. Whether you're a veteran or a non-diverse person, starting a business, most people don't start the business the right way, because if you go do data research, 80% of the businesses fail within the first 2 years. And there's a reason for that. So,
Or
go
even
back to your
faster
question,
sometimes.
what would you tell this person? Well, if this person was in the military in IT and he wants to do something IT related, it's the most crowded space in the United States because many people coming out of the military did some type of technology work, and they want to use that skill and put it to work for themselves. So you need to do some research. How long is it going to take me to get my first client? Because in the government space, there is opportunities in the government space if you're certified, but then you have to go, how long does it take me to get certified? Who's going to help me look for the contracts? How long is it going to take me to develop the RFP when you have 30 people submitting an RFP for one thing, right?
RFP stands for?
Request for proposal.
Okay. I assume that this is a huge document which you deliberately...
It's very huge, and now you need to know how to read them. So the question you asked is a very complicated question.
That's why I brought it in.
You may love, and I'm going to try to give some real life examples because I think it's important. There's a gentleman where I live that came out of the military that used to jump out of helicopters, not afraid of heights. So he, very similar to what you said, I don't want to work for somebody and be told what to do all the time. I want to create my own business. So he said, I want to find a business that nobody wants to do because they don't like height. So you want to know what he does? Gutter cleaning. In central New York, there's a lot of trees. There's a lot of housing development with trees. And the gutters get cluttered with leaves and debris. Well, the reason it's important to take that out is because it rains a lot here and it snows here. This gentleman cleans my gutters 4 times a year because there's no way in heck I'm getting on the top of my roof. Right? So he has become the gutter master. And oh, by the way, he's not certified as a veteran. He just learned about it through me, right? So now he's certified. People don't, I say this very respectfully. They want to know you can solve a problem first. And then they're going to say, Yaryna, you're a veteran? Yes, I want to do business with you, but I need you to clean my gutters, and can you do it cost effectively? Because I don't want to do it. Oh, you're a veteran, by the way? That's great, right? He's solving a problem. And nobody wants to get on roofs to clean gutters. But you want to know what? Because he does so many gutter cleanings now, you want to know what he's moved into? He now puts Christmas lights on houses because nobody wants to do that anymore, right? And people are paying him $10 a square foot to put lights on houses. He solved a problem. And he grew.
I love the momentum.
Quickly because he solved a problem. So that's why Ken said, what does he want to do? He knows his why. What does he want to do? There's a lot of opportunities in Northeast Texas, I'm sure. But to do what? If he wants to build houses, then he's probably got 50 construction people that he's competing against, right? That's what Ken's trying to get at, is you have to really dig into that. But if he got out of the military and he gets military benefits, he might be able to live off of those military benefits. That's what I call a need number, and that's what Ken was saying. He has a need number, and his military benefits might meet that need number. And then there's a want number. What do you want to make? So the need is the military benefits cover the need of the expenses, and that gives him time to build a successful business to get to the want. Somebody coming into this that doesn't have any military benefits that wants to start a business, I'm going to say, if you need to make money, find something that you need to do temporarily to make money while you build a business.
Yes.
Right. But what I really liked in what you were sharing about this story about the gutter, etc., that he didn't only ask the question what I wanted to do, but he from the very beginning, he tried to find a niche, like what everybody else are afraid or
Yes.
scared or don't want to do because they're afraid of heights,
Mark
and I'm not.
Yep.
Mark said something early. He says, you have to solve a problem. You have to be able to solve a problem for somebody. Marketing is about helping someone solve a problem, their problem. That's a famous quote by I forget who did it, but at any rate, the point is that anything that you do, if you can find a niche, if you can find something that you can solve problems, then that's a way to look at your business opportunity.
And I think he's going about it the right way. What problem I want to solve. Then you're going to say is, how am I going to find my first client? I'll go back to the gentleman I left with the gutter cleaning. And this guy he's full of energy, and he's a trip. But he said, I'm going to solve a problem of gutter cleaning. And then he says, how am I going to get my first client? Want to know what he did? He went to Staples and printed off 1,000 flyers that says, I clean gutters. And he drove around and put them in mailboxes in neighborhoods. And then somebody said, yeah, I don't want to clean my gutter. I'll use him. But then he came and he said, well, if you help me get your neighbors interested in cleaning gutters while I'm cleaning yours, instead of it being $150, if your neighbors will do it, I'll do each of yours for $125. And then the next thing you know, the 3 became 7, right? And he did it in one neighborhood. And then it just filtered out from there. So you need to know how, what, right? And that's how simple it was. So whatever that problem is he's solving, how am I going to get my first client?
And use that client to help me get other clients.
And sometimes people are under the notion that you're going to do business with your friends. But sometimes friends don't want to do business with friends, because if I'm not happy with Ken's work and he's my friend, how do I tell Ken I wasn't happy with his work? So that theory of friendships sometimes, but you can say, I want to get X amount of business from this group, this pod of people, and then this pod and this pod. It's called a plan. Even if you scratch it on a piece of paper, it's a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's my question to you. How this gentleman will scale? Because I assume that it's going to be pretty hard to find a lot of folks who are not afraid of height and not afraid of hard work. How he's going to scale? I mean, other than just adding new products and features, but at the end of the day, he will not be able to do it all on his own, right?
So there's a lot of construction workers and roofers that don't have jobs right now, right? But he also is looking to his friends that are in the military that are coming out that used to do what he did, right? Who can I find that's not afraid of heights? Well, there's people that work for companies that just don't want to do roofs anymore, but are not afraid to get up there, right? So there's a lot of ways to communicate what you're looking for people to say, I'm interested, right? There's a lot of ways to do that. And then it's just adding one person at a time.
Yeah, that's the scaling side, is that if you have something where that with a bit of investment and maybe ladders in this case, or, other cleaning material and bringing someone on, that's your scalability. It's one is an easy scalability, because you can add people and a little bit of investment, and now you've got another 10, 15, 20 houses, 30, whatever, that you could have money from.
And Ken said this earlier that nobody ever thinks about. I have a need number to pay my bills. I need to make that number. Well, once you start making that number and you start exceeding that number, you have to start thinking about, do I take those? Just say it's $50,000 that you're making. And all of a sudden, in your bank account, you now have an extra 25. Do I take that 25 for me? Or do I take that 25 and reinvest so I can add more people, so I can help continue to grow the company? Or do I then look at people like a Nana Fund or what have you and say, I'd like to get a line of credit and leverage the bank's money to help scale and grow because I have an extra 25,000 sitting in my bank account that I can leverage to pay back that line of credit. Whose money do I use? Most people take that money for themselves and then struggle to grow because they're taking the money for themselves and they don't have any collateral to have somebody like the bank give them the line of credit. Right.
Or SBA lender, or you name it, community bank, credit unions.
Right.
No matter, even if you're talking to nonprofit lender, folks, you need to have collateral. You need to have some money or better cash
Correct.
flow. Even for the SBA startup loan, you need to show very clearly how you're going to pay those money back. It's not a gift, it's a loan.
Right.
So just to be very clear about that. Will that help you along the way? Of course it will. If you will start to open more and more doors, especially when we were talking about contracting, right? You will definitely gonna need to show to your to the company you're gonna work with that you will be able to survive, that you will be able to scale in case of need, and what might be the best way to show that fast scalability, other than show that, hey, you know what? This community bank is in my corner. They are on a short call. I can call them. I do have a pretty significant credit line. And in case if needed, I will be able to upgrade my, equipment, to hire more people, to deliver everything as fast as you're going to need.
Yaryna, what's the number one thing? And I know you know this, but this is a great conversation to somebody that wants to scale and grow. What is the number one thing that a lending institution, which is actually called investment banking now, what is the number one thing that before somebody gets money, financials might look good, but what is the other thing that banks look at that's extremely important to giving money?
Financial
it's the ability
projections.
to pay it back. It's the ability to pay it back over time.
Yeah.
If I'm going to give a business owner $200,000 line of credit or a $100,000 line of credit, yes, you have good cash flow now, but that doesn't mean that the cash flow is going to be the same in 6 months from now. So walk me through how you're going to sustain that revenue growth. What is your approach? How are you going to do that? Prove to me that I should invest in you. And how many people actually can prove that they have a good approach to generating future revenue?
That's a tricky one because a lot of people, once again, I'm from a tech startup bubble. So I cannot even say for sure how many pitches. And in many, many cases, 80+% of the cases, pitches won't cover how exactly I'm going to do the money. They will cover, here is the sum, here is how I will get into, here is why my idea is brilliant. But in many, many cases, folks will not address this specific question. How will I make money? And how will I be sure, and I will be explained to you, how exactly I will continue to grow my business, to scale my business. Because you're not looking for the business who will be over there like forever, right? Who will continue to do 10K MRR like for the next 6 years. Maybe they will be able to pay the loan back, but will you be interested as the financial institution in building relationship with that type of business? Maybe yes, maybe no. I'm really not sure about that. But if you can see that this particular business is moving clearly to scale, that's much interesting, right?
Anybody who gives money in an investment, whether it's an investment, equity firm, or bank, everybody's in business to make money. So if I'm going to give Yaryna money, you might have a great idea. Yaryna, how are you going to generate revenue not only for you, but how are you going to make my investment in you grow? Because that's what I'm investing in. If I'm going to give you 500,000, I want to know how you're going to get me 600,000.
Come on, 50. Let's be honest here. All the investment institutions are looking at least for 10x returnments. So kind of not 6K, 50.
I'm talking about people that might not want to put their money into the bank, right?
Right. Okay.
You were talking about an investor. Money's money, whether it's through a bank or if I had $200,000 and you pitched me, I'm going to say, you're going to show me your plan to generate revenue for your company. How are you going to systematically grow your business? I like your idea, great idea, but how are you going to execute the plan, right? I always say, think about football for a second. Every week they play a new football team. Like you play football on Sunday, you win or lose. You lost the game, you got another game next week. What do they put together? A plan to defeat the other team. And it's a game plan on offense, on defense, on special teams, okay? They have a plan to defeat the other team. Then it's about execution. Running a business is the same. You have to have a plan to how you're going to take your idea to get somebody to want to give you money so you continue to scale and grow in an investment. Just think of the Sharks. They do a pitch. How many sales do you have? Oh, you don't have any sales. I'm not going to give you any money. Come back to me when you can prove to me that you can generate revenue. If you ever watch the Sharks, the companies that are generating revenue, they then have to share with the Sharks how they're generating the revenue. Walk me through the channels that you're generating revenue for your company. Because if I'm going to give you $1 million at whatever terms the Sharks give, that you have to make a determination if you're willing to give up that money that you would make to give them to give you money, right?
Yeah.
But what's the first thing they ask you? Oh, you're $1 million. Great. How'd you do it? What did you actually make on the $1 million? Well, I only made $8,000. And what do they all do? Oh, right? Why? That means that their expenses are extremely high, that if I gave Yaryna, it's going to take them forever to get their money back. And that's because they don't have good processes from operation to financial to growth, right? And what does every person say? Well, that's why I need you guys, because if I had your knowledge, I could make that more. Well, that means that they got to work harder. And if they're working harder to help you, that means that they're going to want 50% of your business. And you see that right on live TV. That's in real life.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
So,
yeah. Let me talk a little bit about two other really buzzing topics. I don't know what's happening in your bubble, but in my bubble, like tons of folks keep talking about that. The first one is tariffs, and they're like, I will bring all the perspectives again I have in my bubble, and another one is no taxes on tips. So again, I'm from tech world and all of that, right? And all of the folks, especially from the Silicon Valley, after we got our president, well, taking into account that Silicon Valley is in California, right? So there are a lot of questions. And this whole idea of no taxes on tips makes a lot of folks very worried about the fact that, oh, will I have somebody who will bring me my smoothie, or should I be doing it on my own? Is for better or for worse, and no one knows. But I really wonder how everything looks like from the perspective of small business. I do remember that during our previous conversation, you mentioned that you are working with a guy who owns pizzeria, right? And that he is already struggling with all the paperwork and all these wages going up and down, problems, etc. So now with this idea of no taxes on tips, how everything will look like for this guy. I mean, pizzeria owner.
So there's a couple things. You may not be aware of this, but my degree is in hotel restaurant management. I worked in the hotel industry from age 12 to age 27. Okay. Let's not confuse a pizzeria to a regular restaurant. Okay. Pizzerias, tipping's not customary. So people that work in the pizza business get a minimum wage. And minimum wage by state is different. There's a federal minimum wage, and then every state has a minimum wage. Okay. So some of it's regulated on a local level. So pizzerias.
Hold on. How can it be? My apologies for interrupting, but like, how can it be that they are not getting any tips? Because I'm pretty well aware that even in the on the 59 station in New York, if you will try to buy something in this like underground marketplace, like if you will buy coffee for $4, they're gonna ask you to pay 20 more
No.
percent on
So
top of that.
let me explain this to you. Tipping buying coffee is not customary. There is no federal. There's something called restaurant minimum wage. Everybody's tipping today, but it's not what's called customary. If you remember back in the day, when you went to get a cup of coffee, there was no tip jars out. There was no tip jars. It's not customary to tip when you get a cup of coffee. These industries just said, hey, if somebody wants to tip me, they can. I just made some extra money.
Have
And
you
if they
ever tried to not tip? Because I've tried to. It's not like I've tried to. I completely forgot. I just came like from
so
Europe,
let
and
me
the
explain this
culture
to
of
you.
the tipping is like super different comparing to United States. You're given tip
Yeah.
only in case if you're super happy with the service. So I completely forgot. The folks from the restaurant ran out of the restaurant. They caught me, and they essentially, well, not forced, like
So
but
there's let me explain this to you because there's a you're I don't want you to confuse the industries. In the restaurant industry where you buy food and you're somebody serving you, okay? If you go to a Starbucks and they serve food, okay? That Starbucks, the cook, there's no servers serving you food.
yeah, but have
Those
you
people,
tried to not
hey,
tip in
let me,
Starbucks?
yes, that's your
Not
fault if
gonna
you do.
work.
Well, you can't, that's your fault. That's you feeling the pressure. I go to Starbucks, I go to Panera, I never tip. Unless somebody goes out of their way to provide me good service, but I am not required to tip. I'm not required to tip in a pizzeria. I'm not required to tip at Panera or Starbucks. I am not required to tip. That's because those businesses pay what's called a minimum wage that's required. In New York State, it's $16 an hour. People that work at those industries where it's not customary to tip make minimum wage, 16 bucks. If they put it into their system, would you like to add a tip? That's a choice, not a requirement. If
How
you
would you
choose to,
know if that's a choice or requirement? Because
because
it's
I,
very interesting topic for me because I really would love to. I don't know if that's even possible, but honestly, I love that culture back in Europe that you're living tips in case if you are super happy. That's your gratitude.
but I want to get back to the original question of how tips affect businesses. Businesses that where people serve you, okay? Restaurants. Let's just say restaurants. You go into a restaurant, you have a server. There's something federal minimum wage for a server is $2.13. Federal minimum wage for a server is $2.13. In New York State, anybody that's a server gets paid $13.35. But regular minimum wage is $16. So, because tipping is customary with people that are doing serving, that restaurant has to pay a salary or an hourly rate of $13.35. But when they collect tips, let's just say it's $100 and they worked 8 hours. That means that they made $8 extra an hour if they made $100 in tips. That means that if I made $8 an hour, I didn't make $13.35. I made $21.35 an hour because you take their hourly rate plus their tips, and that tells you. That's called, I don't want this to get complicated, but it's very complicated because it's called tips to minimum. Okay? That's why in high-end restaurants where people make $500,000, they have to claim 10% of their gross receipts. A gross receipt is a ticket that if Ken goes out to eat and he ate for $100, it always says a good tip is 20%. So let's just say there's 10 tables and that's $1,000 in gross receipts. $100 a ticket. It's called a ticket.
Hmm.
That's $1,000 in gross receipts. Every state's a little different in what the requirement is, but that business is required to report 10% of that to the government in tips, even though it's not 100. They have a certain requirement that they then have to pay taxes on. Okay.
On the
Now, does
tips that
everybody?
they were collected,
It's
right?
the business owner's responsibility in New York State to say, okay, Yaryna's a server. The thought she served people that was $1,000. I need to collect 10% of the $1,000, which is $100 to claim in tips and pay taxes on. Okay,
Okay.
that's why I say every state's different.
Yeah.
Every state's different. Okay.
So now with this whole idea, no taxes on tips.
So this is why I don't like politics, Yaryna, and I don't like to bring politics into this. It sounds good.
Does it?
Everything sounds good. Let me tell you what I mean sounds good. In politics, it's all about getting the vote. But then there's a reality. That's great that you say that, but just like in anything else we do, okay, how are you going to do that? What's the repercussion of doing it? You got no plan to how that's going to be executed, right? It's great to say things up here at 50,000 feet, but then you have to dial it down because I don't know necessarily that this is going to go through on a federal level because there's an impact to it. And I'll tell you what I mean. If I know that Yaryna makes $13.35 an hour as a restaurant server and she just made $1,000 in tips and you don't have to pay taxes on that, I may not tip Yaryna as much money. People might not tip as much because why can you make $1,000 in tips and not pay taxes? And I work my butt off and I make the same $1,000 and I got to pay taxes. Think about that. $1,000 is $1,000. Why is it okay for them, but it's not okay for the other person, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be very difficult. But there's also and I think there'll be repercussion in those industries to say, well, if they're only making $13.35 an hour and they don't have to pay taxes on their tips, I'm only making $16 an hour and I don't make any tips. I want to make $20 an hour because they're getting $1,000 tax free as a server. Plus they're getting $13.35 the hourly rate. And I'm only making 16 with no tips because I'm a dishwasher. I don't want to dishwash anymore. I want to be a server. Or I want you to increase my pay. So the equity, fairness, I think there'll be issues there. Right?
Absolutely. That's why I was telling that, like, I'm not so sure if this idea, which sounds catchy, right, is that good. You really need to take a look, right, from all the perspectives.
So let's just go back that it's an election. People say what they're going to do to get elected. Okay. And by the way, I don't care who people voted for, but if somebody's going to throw something out there that they're going to do something, I'm going to say how. How are you going to do it?
Well, you know, right, that this, like, how you can tell that politician is lying. Have you heard it? No. His lips are moving.
But my point is, that's why I don't.
There you go.
But that's why I don't get too worked up about what people say, right? Because there is a consequence to everything. And the consequence to everything is somebody's going to pay for it. And let's go to the pizza business because this is real. There are tip jars in the counter of my pizzeria. But you're not required to tip at all. If I decide to tip, it's because I'm being generous or I want to be nice.
Okay.
They don't have to report that. They're just collecting that money.
They meaning pizzeria.
Correct.
Okay.
But what does affect the pizzeria, because you had mentioned my pizzeria earlier, is when you keep an eye on tariffs, right? Everything sounds good.
Oh, hold on about tariffs.
But I want to explain about how this affects the pizza industry.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Everything sounds good, but then there's the consequence of who pays for it. And who pays for it is that, let's just use vegetables for a second. Our pizzeria uses fresh vegetables. Well, the cost for the farmers to grow vegetables went up because chemical supplies went up. So there's a domino effect to everything, right? To growing something, especially if it's fresh. If the cost of all the material they use goes up to grow the vegetable, the cost to the pizzeria is going to be higher, right? That's why gas in energy is such a big deal, because if gas prices go up, it costs the person who delivers the gas more money to deliver it, which means their fees go up. if the hourly rates go up, what is inevitable something's going to do as a business owner? So there's two things, and here's the math I use. If I make $1 million, and as a business owner, I make $100,000, that's what I make. And the cost of everything is going up, and I'm the business owner used to getting $100,000, and the cost of everything goes up, I might only make $90,000 or $85,000. What do you think it's inevitable that business owner is going to do? He's going to say, I'm going to lose $15,000 in an income, so I'm going to increase. If you put a topping on and it used to be 50 cents, and you know how many pizzas you sell, I'm going to increase that topping from 50 cents to 65 cents. And you just do the math. Or the cost of cheese that just went up, or the cost of chickens, right? Chicken wings. All of that went up.
Right. Ken, I assume that you wanted to add something, because we are like, buzzing around, but
Well, I mean, I don't have the perspective on the minimum wage impact of the tips. I mean, in our area, pizza delivery people, anybody that delivers takeout, is expecting a tip.
Correct.
So, but I thought my understanding was where they're supposed to be reporting that as revenue today, that the policy of no tax on tips would mean don't have to report that as income that's taxable income. So when I'm listening to the arguments on taxes on tips, I'm thinking of the people, and I don't, whether you choose to give a tip at Starbucks or not, I think that's completely your choice, and regardless of what they think they should be getting. Mm-hmm. But the point is when someone delivers a pizza to the house or takeout to the house or Chinese food or whatever, there's always a tip involved. Because
I want to say something to that. And again, it is state specific. That's why I don't get too worked up about the tax on tips. Where I am, if I order over the line, the person asks me, do you wish to give the driver a tip? I don't have to give that driver a tip where I am. I don't have to. I choose to, because I appreciate, and there's another side of what Ken's saying, and I'm not trying to interrupt him. I just happen to know this well. I don't know if the business owner pays a higher minimum wage because that person's using their own car. I will never know that, right? I will never know. I know with our pizzeria that they don't give anything, which is fine. They don't have to. So tipping is customary, that they are required to report that. Whether somebody does or not, you're relying on somebody's honesty when they get $5, right?
And that's what I was getting at, is that we in our area, there's no question if we're going to, we don't get the question if we're planning to pay somebody give somebody a tip or not. That's purely discretional at the delivery point, and sometimes,
well, not necessarily, because for example, if you were going to use, not necessarily it's completely discretional. What do I mean? If you're using some mobile application, let's say, I don't know, DoorDash or Uber Eats, right? You will be able to pay, to tip, and that's like my problem with that. I will get to there a little bit later on. You're gonna need to tip both to restaurant and to the guy who will deliver your food, and this application for sure will have the details how much exactly they charge your credit card. Now to the problem I have with this both application. Back in Ukraine, we also had Uber Eats. When was the moment where you were asking whether you want to give a tip to both to the restaurant and to the service folks? After you received your delivery. After you received your delivery, you will be prompted inside the application to provide some kind of a feedback on both quality of the food and delivery, and tip afterwards to both of them or only to one of them. If you're ordering your food in the United States as soon as you're going to hit the button, order, you will be prompted without possibility to skip it
You know that
to
you don't have to
pay
give
the
a tip,
tips.
right? You know that you do not have to give a tip on DoorDash.
There is no way to skip it. You
Yes,
have
it is.
to.
You
Yes,
don't
there
have to
is.
put anything in.
You could
Absolutely.
put zero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or no tip.
You can put zero,
or
right?
no tip.
Right.
Here's the reality though. If you put no tip, your order might take a little longer. And I can show you proof that you're not required to tip on DoorDash or any app. You don't have to tip on those platforms.
And so the other side of this is that a lot of times you may charge the food, but the tip is cash at the point of delivery. So in the charges that the restaurant processes, you don't necessarily, especially if it's a takeout situation, you don't have, you don't ever bump it up at the tip level. I mean, we don't level, but we do tip at the door for the drivers.
So Ken's making a good point here.
Part of this was just one final thought. Sorry, Mark. Part of this was that no tax on tips is thinking about it in terms of people that get tips as part of their compensation, either at the restaurants or at the driver's side, that is what they get tipped on, or what they get taxed on is the core minimum wage salary or whatever they're getting. The point of no tax on tips, I believe, is meant to recognize that some people don't get a very high wage in some areas, especially in some of the states where the minimum wage is considerably less than New York or Massachusetts or wherever you are. That there's a lot of states where the minimum wage is still $7 an hour for in that range, and so people rely on the tips to just have enough, to make up for the job that doesn't pay that much. And so I think the idea of no tax on tips was primarily, it gets complicated with what you were talking about, Mark, but if you take the simple example is people that get tips in the restaurants or in the services, that those are just, you're supposed to report those as income, but what they're trying, I think that no tax on tips is mainly to say that would be exempt. Now, I don't know if that's exactly the right definition because I don't have the details on that, but that would be my impression of what that was appealing about.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that that's going to go. I don't think it'll make it to its end result. There's too much of a consequence, and this again, it's my opinion, because it's just the restaurant industry is, besides the trucking industry, the restaurant industry is the number one employment industry in the United States, people-wise, number one. Payroll statistic, right, is one of the top industries that people work because of the tips, and people make a lot of money with tips. If they took away the taxes on that, it's a significant dollar value. So if they did the math and the loss of that revenue stream, you got to say, well, where's that going to be made up? And it's just going to be made up somewhere else, right? It's got to be made up somewhere else, right? Because it's a significant amount. Yeah. If you took the gross receipts of every restaurant that collected tips, which is a lot, it's a huge revenue stream. To me, that just sounded good, right? It sounded good. Huge impact, though, if they did that. Huge.
Well, that would be interesting to, double click on that and double check, like in a year from now, just it would be funny, just to brought this particular piece of this episode back online and say, hey, Mark, you know what? You told that. You told so. You were right.
Look, I'm anything for trying to pay less taxes. I remember the day every time you made $1, you lost 10 cents, right? Then for every dollar you make, it's 20 cents. Well, for every dollar we make now, it's a significant amount, right? We don't make $1 anymore. We'd be lucky if we make 50 cents or 60 cents on that dollar, right? So to drive down prices so people can make more, I think is important. How to do that, that's a complicated thing, right? Because I'm not necessarily sure you can peel back everything because we're paying things now, right? We become accustomed to paying it. Do we have to dial it back? Yeah, absolutely. I think we do. Otherwise, more people are going to rely on the government for things, right? Because the cost of everything's so high.
I'm not sure whether we have to go toward that way, lowering prices, or we have to go other way, increasing incomes.
I'll tell you the domino effect that you increase incomes, you're going to pay more taxes unless they lower the thresholds of taxes that you pay, payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare, whatever, right? They've talked about paying into Social Security wherever when there used to be what's called a wage-based limit. So if they increase what's called a wage-based limit for federal unemployment and state unemployment, and then there's no limits on Social Security of how often you pay into it, then you're just paying higher taxes. People can't afford, when you go to the grocery store today, I look at one bag and it's $100. That can't sustain itself.
No, it cannot.
It can't. So the middle class is becoming poor.
Or disappearing, unfortunately. Like,
right?
there are already this talks and ideas buzzing around that middle class in United States, which used to be the strongest one maybe in the world, disappearing because the difference between the folks who can allow themselves
high earners
something
and low earners, there'll be no middle. If
exactly.
it continues the way there is, there will be no middle.
And that's a big problem, but let's leave that for another conversation. We already had our hour, and I know that you, Mark, have a hard stop. So
this is a great conversation. Love to continue
it really is, and I would love to get back to this particular topic next time, because I tend to believe that this is very important. This whole idea of the winning of middle class, we really need to get back to it, because small businesses and small business owners we're essentially the one who were the backbone not only of the economy but of the middle class.
And Yaryna, Ken, I don't mean to interrupt you, Ken, but I actually own the Zoom invitation for my next call at 11, and I don't want anybody to be mad at me.
All right. It was a great conversation, folks. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
All right.
And hey, guys, do not forget, subscribe, like, share. Well, you know the drill.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.